You're listening to the Final Say Radio Show, a Rappaport Media production, with your host Brett Rappaport and co-host John Rappaport.
Without further ado, we've got the ambassador with us. I want to welcome back to the Final Say Radio Show, Ambassador Francis Rooney, who served under George Bush, W. Bush, at the Holy See, and he also has a wonderful book out called The Global Vatican, and he's joining us again. Ambassador, first of all, welcome, and thank you for joining us again.
Well, Brett, thank you for having me back on.
Well, John and I are always, we love having you on. We're always interested to hear your take on some of the current events going on in and around the world. And it's just unfortunate. It really is. And our hearts break with some of the things that we have to discuss with you. And again, we see more news reports coming from parts of Africa and the Middle East and other places around the world, but particularly those two places, where you see a slaughter of Christians of all types. And it's senseless killing. And the other thing that's troublesome, well, two parts. One is the fact that in many cases, given the decision, convert to another religion, do I have to name it, or die. And then on the other hand, you have the lack, in most cases, the lack of a voice coming from the world leaders speaking up and condemning this action as much as they should be, because I think it's underwhelming, if anything.
Well, I think that harkens back to, the fundamental diplomacy of the Holy See that goes back to Regensburg, where the Pope called on the Muslims to take responsibility for their own religion and to speak up against the perversion of it by these radicalized segments. And I agree with you. There's not enough of that. And there's not enough of the governments who have the most to gain and the most to lose right there in the Middle East and Africa speaking up and taking actions as well. The Holy See can only speak up and use its soft power and try to urge people to bring Islam into consensus with modernity, and when that's backed by secular powers taking forceful actions, then maybe some things will be done.
And that's
absolutely. I'm sorry.
Isn't this a little bit difficult for the Pope to handle, even though he's been far more savvy with technology and so forth? Because when you're dealing with a true clash of civilizations, and you use the term aptly soft power, it's very difficult for a faith leader, a man of peace, to address a situation like this because it requires a discussion about war. So how does he effectively apply that soft power without sounding like a hawk himself?
Well, he did. On his trip back from Korea, he said, that maybe the just war theory would apply because ISIS is such a broad-based supernumerary threat, rather than being a single sovereign threat like Iraq was. And I think that's going pretty far for a pope to say, and he said basically, under the just war theory, you need to have a community of nations, not just one or two nations, to oppose a pan-sovereign threat. And that's what we have, and that's exactly what I think Secretary Kerry's been trying to recruit. So maybe those words will do some good. I don't know.
Ambassador, I can't remember if we spoke to you. I know we spoke recently, but I can't remember if the prayer breakfast happened before or after that. But I'd like your thought on just the take that the president had, Barack Obama, and some of his comments, because I thought they were actually offensive to the church, offensive to really anyone. But I also want to get your take on the difference, because I think there has been a positive, not all the time, but a pretty positive response to these horrific actions by the church and Pope Francis. But contrast that to the Obama administration, I think you have two completely different stories.
Well, yeah, you do. Let's start with the prayer breakfast, though. It's an insult to more than just religion. It's an insult to anybody's intelligence that the president would have used the example of medieval behavior in the Crusades as an excuse for what the damn Muslims are doing now. It makes no sense. The correct way to apply that analogy, in my opinion, is to say that the analogy to the Crusades is that the modern world won't put up with medieval behavior now, and that the radical Muslims need to bring their actions back into consensus with the modern world, not use the past as an example, as an excuse for what they're doing. And that's basically what Benedict was saying at Regensburg when he says this kind of behavior has no place in the 21st century. You guys need to figure it out, or the world's going to have to deal with you. Now, what's going on with the Obama administration? They won't say the word Islamic or Muslim. They want to consider these violent terrorist acts as some kind of random criminality, like they're a bunch of carjackers or something. And they want to deprecate the level of conflict from war down to, like I say, abject criminality. Well, I think this is a war. I think the people that fight in it are enemy combatants, whether they're American or otherwise. And I think exceptional measures of containment and interdiction are called for. And I love what I saw in Spain and France a couple of weeks ago, where they're passing these very broad laws, war powers laws, if you will, to watch people that are going on to radical Islamic recruiting websites, and they're going to step up monitoring where people go in and out of radicalized mosques and where people go in and out of countries that are at-risk countries.
I think you're spot on when you make the clear point that this is a war. And first off, I have frequent conversations with liberal friends and family where I try to explain to them two things. One, war isn't something you necessarily just participate in because you like war. War's something you very often, in most cases, are drawn into, and you fight it because you love peace. You're not fighting it because of the old, the old statement. It's all about the war machine. Because the reality is, it's really, there's an ideological. This is a battle in the marketplace of ideological ideas, and the problem that I have within all of this is the people who really are fighting on the right side of the ideological ideas, people like the Pope, are getting marginalized by our president, who seems to be spending most of his time trying to serve as apologist in chief for what animates goals. And I just wanted to point to, even just a few days ago, you had the Vatican police confirming that, ISIS is making legitimate threats. And it's like, you're apologizing, you meaning our president is apologizing for the ideology at the very same time the ideology is doing the unthinkable, threatening the Pope, threatening the Vatican, threatening to put their flag over the cathedral. It's insane.
I guess the only positive outgrowth of your comment is that the president is marginalizing himself with a lot more people than the Pope. He's obviously marginalized himself with a lot of Europe who's waking up to the level of this threat, like Spain and France. He's marginalized himself with Israel. And I think more and more he's marginalizing himself with the American people. Because at the end of the day, the one thing that our government's supposed to do is protect the people.
Yeah, absolutely. Ambassador, we have a few friends of the program who've actually listened to your segments over the years in our chat room, and they've typed in a few questions, if you don't mind responding to some of them. And I'll just start with the top here. And the first question is, do you see any significance of President Obama continually referring to ISIS as ISIL? And the reason they're asking is because they've always viewed the Levant as including Israel and Egypt, and they almost feel like it's being done on purpose. Do you view it in that way, or do you see any problem with that?
I think he's definitely doing it on purpose, and he's the only one that refers to ISIL. And I'm not sure if it has something to do with Israel or something to do with Lebanon. I don't know why he's doing it. The activities of Hezbollah in Lebanon are linked to Syria and linked to Iran. So you could make one argument that you call it ISIL to bring them into the network. But on the other hand, with all that's going on with this, is absolutely throwing Israel under the bus. Maybe there is some ulterior motive there. I don't know. But at the end of the day, it's really irrelevant what he calls it. He's self-marginalized.
That's true. So two other questions. I'll just give them to you both at the same time. The first part is your comment or your thoughts on the Muslim Brotherhood, and again the president's ongoing relationship, or at least with the administration, on trying to prop them up, and also the other question has to do with Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. Do you think that should remain open, and should the terrorists or the people that we capture on a battlefield remain there? And just, I know it doesn't have to do with your role as the ambassador, but just a question for you.
Okay, the Muslim Brotherhood situation is really complex. The Council on American Islamic the Council on American Islamic Relations and the Muslim American Foundation have both been found to have been founded by the Muslim Brotherhood and to be basically propaganda fronts in the United States, and Obama's welcomed them. They even kind of nose their way into George Bush's administration a little bit, but Obama uses them to pick military chaplains, and it's insidious. And the FBI's got these guys on tape as having being linked to the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt and the Middle East. And I don't understand why he backed the Morsi government when he had a perfect opportunity to say, well, let the Egyptian people determine what they want, and be thankful they got rid of Muslim Brotherhood. So, it's another instance of his bending over backwards to support Islamic activity that could be detrimental to the United States. It certainly is with the Muslim Brotherhood fronts in the United States. And, to me, that goes back to what he said in 2009 when he went to Egypt. He said, we're going to reset the clock on the United States' relationship with Islam because of all the bad actions that colonial America has done to deprive the rights of Muslims. I mean, imagine the President of the United States going to Egypt and saying that stuff. And as far as Gitmo, if you consider it a war, then Gitmo is a legitimate containment strategy, just like any other camp would be in a war, and it's not something that's subject to Miranda rights and Fourth Amendment rights and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's part of the Justice Department's strategy of trying to deprecate the conflict from a war down to a criminality so they can try people with U.S. courts and have an excuse to get rid of Guantanamo. Where else are you going to put them? I mean, look, 40% of people that leave Guantanamo go back to leadership positions in radical Islamic terrorist groups.
Well, boy, this is such a wide swath of area that I can almost comment on. But let me first say, with the Hillary 2016 hashtag flowing all around, based on your last comment, it's so critical to understand that this treating it like a police action against a radical individual's quote-unquote fear, as opposed to a clash of civilizations between the war of ideologies, is a mistake that Clinton made. And that led to 9/11, because we had all these elevating threats, and it wasn't until we literally saw the collapse of the symbol that represents American capitalism crashing down on our brothers and sisters did most of the country wake up, but only temporarily. I want to transition, if you will, if you think about this from an ideological perspective, because Brett asked a question that kind of puts you in a hot seat a bit, which is, why is the president doing this? Well, to me, I think there's only three reasons why you usually have any political leader animated, right? Let's throw the first one out and call it stupidity, naivete, and so forth. The president is not stupid. People like to say that. He is in no way a stupid man, a lazy man, a disinterested man. The second would be follow the money. I don't see him. I see that as being an animator for the Clintons. But follow the ideology, which I think is a third key animator, and I think you have a lot there. And so I wanted to transition that to get your take on one of the places where the ideology is spending a ton of money is, and to a large extent this is where you tie in the Muslim Brotherhood, is through the BDS movement, which is very heavily supported financially on college campuses, which is teaching our young people that the beacon of Judeo-Christian values in the Middle East, Israel, are the bad guys, and the terrorists who subjugate women and gays and Jews and Christians and everybody else are the victim here. So I wanted to get your take on where's the Vatican's position, and have they had any active presence in trying to counter the BDS movement?
I don't know that they have, and I don't know that they really have standing to do it in the United States. I mean, obviously, there's in the Catholic university system, they have opportunities to make sure that there's no infiltration, and that the appeasement, if you will, of Muslim that appeasement doesn't take place. Although sometimes you got to wonder. A couple of places I could mention that I think sometimes they're a little bit more multicultural in that for its own sake than they need to be. But this is a war of 1,000 cuts here. It's a propaganda war. You hit the nail on the head. And every time we see these instances of appeasement in the United States, whether it's talking about maybe applying Sharia law in domestic situations, which is, to me, a litmus test, which can't happen, or we let kids go to mosques, but they won't go to synagogues or churches for school days and things like that. They're winning the game, and we have to get American people to wake up and see what the risks are to this kinds of behaviors.
Ambassador, I wanted to thank you, and our friends in the chat room actually thank you, and they thought your answers were wonderful. But I do, with the few minutes we have left, want to give you a little bit of time to discuss the op-ed that you had in Time magazine, where you really made the argument that Pope Francis and the Holy See are most suited to weigh in diplomatically to help build this international alliance to in opposition of the Islamic extremism that we've been discussing. So I just want to give you an opportunity to just make a few comments on that op-ed that you had.
Okay. Well, I think there's three reasons that the Holy See is uniquely positioned to be helpful in this area, in the soft power side of things, not the hard power side of things. One is because they have this non-hegemonic agenda. They're respected by all sides because they don't seek territory or oil or any of that kind of stuff. Second, because they have a convening power that is unique, and which probably relates to the first thing, where they've shown the ability to bring different religions together, to use the symbolism of the office, like the Pope's trip to Albania, to highlight the opportunities that do exist in the world for religions to work together, and to highlight the evils of appeasement and the need to confront problems. And the last thing is, I think the fact that they're a religious body may give them a standing to weigh in here in what is essentially a religious dispute, or at least a dispute which is using religion as an excuse. And that's what the Pope tried to do at Regensburg.
Absolutely. Well, Ambassador, it's always a pleasure to speak with you. Again, folks, you could find that article in Time magazine, time.com. And we always appreciate the discussions that we have with you. But I just wanted to make one statement here. Hopefully in 2016 we have a new president. Hopefully that president is in the Republican Party, and we could start to change course and correct some of the mistakes that we've made over these past 6, but we'll be 8 years at that point. And I'd like to say that I hope that whoever the next president is, that they'll call upon you to once again serve the country, because one, you did a fantastic job, and I think that you understand so many of the issues, and you'd be a great person to have aboard again. So I just wanted to say that on behalf of John and I, and thank you.
Well, Brett and John, thank you for having me on, and I hope that we get that president that you talk about. I would have to say, if I might, even if we get a Democrat, we might find one that's got less of this colonial and Islamic baggage than the one that we have.
Well, you can't do worse.
Yeah, exactly.
I agree with you there.
Although the point about Clinton was profound, okay? Look at how many canary in the coal mines we had before 9/11. The coal, Kenya, the whole bit.
Yeah, ignored as always, though, unfortunately.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks. Great speaking with you as always. We look forward to having you again soon, and stay warm.
Thank you very much. Have a nice afternoon.
All right. Take care. Again, Francis Rooney served as the U.S. Ambassador to the Holy See under George W. Bush from 2005 to 2008. He's a frequent contributor here and guest on the Final Say radio show.